She thought the mafia boss never noticed her until he saw another man touch her. The numbers never lied, even if the men who provided them did. Lena Hart sat behind the safety of her dual monitors, the blue light reflecting in her tired hazel eyes. It was 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, and the 24th floor of the Moretti Group headquarters was almost silent. This was the time Lena liked best. The aggressive hum of the day trading floor was gone. The heavy footsteps of security contractors had faded, and she could pretend, just for a moment, that she was merely an accountant at a standard logistics firm in Harbor Point, rather than the woman balancing the books for the most feared crime syndicate on the eastern seaboard. She adjusted her glasses and typed a correction into the spreadsheet. To the IRS and the general public, the Moretti Group moved freight, shipping containers, construction materials, and luxury imports. To Lena, who saw the raw data before it was sanitized for the official ledger, they moved power. She kept her head down. That was the rule she had given herself 2 years ago when she took the job. The salary was double what any other firm offered, enough to pay off her father's lingering medical debts and keep the heat on in her small apartment. But the cost was a constant, low-level dread that sat in her stomach like a stone. Invisibility was her armor. She wore charcoal gray cardigans that swallowed her figure. She wore her brown hair in a severe bun that pulled tight against her scalp. She never spoke in the break room, never asked questions about the vague invoices listed as consultation fees, and never, ever made eye contact with the man whose name was etched in silver on the double doors at the end of the hall, Dante Moretti. Just thinking his name made her fingers pause over the keyboard. The elevator dinged down the hall, a sharp, clear sound that shattered the quiet. Lena did not look up. She knew the cadence of those footsteps. There was a heavy, rhythmic thud of combat boots, the bodyguards, and then the distinct, confident strike of Italian leather against the marble floor. The air in the office seemed to change when he arrived. It grew thinner, sharper. Lena focused intensely on the reconciliation of the transport budget. "Do not look up," she told herself. "He does not know you exist. You are just part of the furniture." Dante Moretti walked past her cubicle row. He was flanked by 2 men who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast, but Dante himself was a study in terrifying elegance. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained against the fabric of a bespoke navy suit. His hair was dark, kept short and precise, and his profile was carved from granite, sharp nose, heavy brow, and a jawline that looked like it could take a punch without flinching. As he passed, he was speaking into his cell phone. His voice was a low baritone that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "I need the shipment cleared by midnight," he said, his tone flat and unyielding. "If the Port Authority gives you trouble, remind them who holds the union contracts." Lena held her breath. He was 10 feet away. Then, his voice shifted. It was a subtle change, one that perhaps only someone who listened as closely as Lena would notice. "I know it is late. Sophia," he said, softer now, "I will be there for the recital on Sunday. I promise. Go to sleep." The warmth in those few words made Lena's chest ache. It was the only glimpse she ever got of the man beneath the monster. Dante Moretti was a killer, a kingpin, a man who allegedly ordered hits as easily as he ordered espresso, but he loved his little sister. He disappeared into his office, the heavy doors clicking shut behind him. The oxygen returned to the room, and Lena let out a shaky exhale. She realized her heart was hammering against her ribs. It was pathetic, really. A 30-year-old woman nursing a crush on a man who was arguably the most dangerous predator in the city. She told herself it was just fantasy. A man like Dante Moretti did not look at women like Lena Hart. To him, she was a calculator with a pulse. Inside the executive office, Dante Moretti unbuttoned his suit jacket and hung it on the rack. He rolled up his white sleeves to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a faint, jagged scar running down his left wrist. He poured himself a glass of water, ignoring the expensive scotch on the sidebar. He needed a clear head. The Navarro family was pushing into the south docks. 2 of his trucks had been delayed yesterday. The pressure was mounting, a tightening vice around his skull. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop. Pulling up the internal security feeds, he cycled through the cameras, the lobby, the garage, the loading bays. Then his finger paused on the feed for the accounting department. There she was, the girl in the gray sweater, Lena. Dante watched the screen for a moment, his face impassive. She was still working. Everyone else had left an hour ago. She was always the last one there, scrubbing the numbers until they were perfect. He liked that about her. He liked that she never gossiped in the kitchen. He liked the way she organized her desk with military precision. Most people looked at him with naked fear or sycophantic greed. But once, 3 months ago, he had caught Lena watching him during a stormy afternoon when the power flickered. She had not looked terrified. She had looked curious, sad, almost. He zoomed in slightly on the grain of the video feed. She was rubbing her temples. She looked exhausted. Go home, Lena, he thought, though he would never say it aloud. He closed the feed. He could not afford to be distracted by the quiet accountant with the sad eyes. Tonight was the client appreciation event at the rooftop lounge. It was a polite term for a show of force, the city's elite. The politicians on his payroll and the rival lieutenants would all be there. He had to be the king. 2 hours later, Lena stood in front of the mirror in the staff restroom, feeling like an imposter. Her friend Sarah had bullied her into this dress. It was black, sleeveless, and fitted, ending just at the knee. It was not revealing by modern standards, but for Lena, who lived in oversized wool, it felt like she was walking around naked. She tugged at the hem, trying to pull it down. You have to go, Sarah had said. You prepared the budget for the event. If the CFO asks for a breakdown of the catering costs, you need to be there. Lena took a deep breath, applied a swipe of lipstick that felt too red, and took the elevator up to the roof. The doors opened, and the noise hit her first. A wall of laughter, clinking glass, and jazz music. The rooftop of the Moretti Tower was spectacular. Glass walls offered a panoramic view of Harbor Point, the city lights glittering like diamonds against the velvet dark of the ocean. Waiters circulated with silver trays, men in $5,000 suits huddled in corners, smoking cigars that smelled of earth and money. Women with sharp smiles and sharper diamonds draped themselves over the railings. Lena clutched her tablet against her chest like a shield. She found a spot near a decorative pillar, hoping to blend into the shadows. She felt small. She felt cheap. Everyone here moved with the easy confidence of predators, and she was just a grazing animal hoping not to be noticed. She scanned the room and found him immediately. Dante stood near the bar, the center of gravity for the entire party. He had changed into a tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it looked like a second skin. He was listening to a city councilman, his expression bored but attentive. He held a tumbler of soda water in one hand. Lena watched him, unable to look away. He looked regal, untouchable. Hey, you look like you were about to make a run for the fire escape. The voice startled her. Lena jumped, nearly dropping her tablet. A large hand steadied her arm. Easy there. I did not mean to spook you. Lena looked up. Standing next to her was a man she did not recognize, though he wore the standard earpiece of the security detail. He was tall, with sandy blonde hair and a crooked nose that suggested it had been broken a few times. He had a warm, open smile, something rare in this building. I am Eli, he said. New guy. Security, I am Lena, she stammered, adjusting her glasses. Accounting, I figured. Eli grinned. You are the only one here holding a computer instead of a cocktail. You look terrified. Lena, relax. The boss is paying for the open bar. I am not terrified. Lena lied. I am just observant. Eli laughed. It was a nice sound. He stepped closer as a group of boisterous investors pushed past them, nearly knocking Lena over. Careful, Eli said. He placed his hand on the small of her back to guide her out of the path of the crowd. The touch was electric, not because of attraction, but because of the sheer shock of it. No one touched Lena. She was the invisible woman. But Eli's hand was warm and heavy through the thin fabric of her dress. He guided her toward the edge of the terrace where the air was cooler. You doing okay? Eli asked, keeping his hand on her arm now to steady her as her heel caught on a paving stone. I am fine. Lena said, her cheeks flushing hot. "Thank you." She looked up at him and smiled, a genuine, shy smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. For a second, she forgot about the danger, the money and the man across the room. It was nice to be seen. Across the terrace, the glass tumbler in Dante Moretti's hand creaked under the sudden pressure of his grip. He had been listening to the councilman drone on about zoning permits, but his eyes had been tracking Lena since she walked in. He had noticed the dress, he had noticed the curve of her neck and the way the wind caught the loose strands of hair escaping her bun. He had felt a strange, smug satisfaction that no one else seemed to be looking at her. She was his secret. Then the new hire, the ex-Army Ranger ward, had walked up to her. Dante saw Eli lean in. He saw Lena jump. And then he saw the hand. Eli's large hand splayed across the small of Lena's back. Dante's vision narrowed to a tunnel. The noise of the party faded into a dull roar. A cold, sharp spike of rage drove itself into his chest. It was not rational. It was primal. That was his employee, his accountant, his something. And then Eli touched her arm, and Lena smiled at him. She laughed. Dante's jaw tightened so hard his teeth ached. A muscle in his cheek ticked violently. "Mr. Moretti?" the councilman asked. "Are you listening?" "Get out of my face," Dante said. The voice was not loud, but it was so venomous that the councilman turned pale and stepped back without a word. Dante cut the meeting short. He handed his drink to a passing waiter and moved to the edge of the room, positioning himself in the shadows where he could watch. He watched them for the next hour. He watched how Eli stayed close to her, acting the protector. He watched how other men, who had ignored Lena all night, suddenly glanced at her because another male had claimed her attention. He watched the flush on Lena's skin. He realized with a jolt that shook his very foundation that he hated it. He hated seeing another man's hands on her. He hated that she was smiling at a stranger when she could barely look Dante in the eye without trembling. It was jealousy. Pure, black, ugly jealousy. He waited until the crowd began to thin. He waited until Eli was called away to the perimeter check. Dante pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed his assistant. "Send Hart to my office," he said. "Now." Lena was packing up her things in the coat check room when the message came. The CFO told her the boss wanted to review the night's projected expenses immediately. Her stomach dropped. Had she made a mistake? Had the numbers been wrong? She took the private elevator down to the executive suite. The hallway was dark now, the secretaries long gone. Only the light from Dante's office spilled out onto the carpet. She knocked on the heavy oak door. "Enter," a voice commanded. Lena pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office was vast, smelling of leather and sandalwood. The overhead lights were off, leaving the room illuminated only by the glow of the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Dante was standing by the window, his back to her. He had removed his jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, contrasting starkly against the darkness of the room. "Sir?" Lena said, her voice trembling slightly. "You asked for the expense reports?" Dante turned slowly. His face was in shadow, but she could feel the weight of his stare. It felt physical, like a touch. "Leave the report on the desk," he said. Lena walked forward, her heels clicking nervously on the hardwood. She placed the folder on the mahogany desk. She turned to leave, desperate to escape the suffocating tension. Wait. The word cracked like a whip. Lena froze. Dante walked around the desk. He moved with a prowling grace, closing the distance between them until he was standing just a few feet away, up close. He was overwhelming. The sheer size of him, the heat radiating from his body, made Lena's breath hitch in her throat. He looked tired, but his eyes were alert, burning with a dark intensity she had never seen before. "You seem to enjoy yourself tonight," Dante said. His voice was smooth, but there was a jagged edge beneath it. I tried to be professional, sir," Lena managed to say. "Professional," Dante repeated, tasting the word. "Is that what you call letting the new security guard paw at you in the middle of a client event?" Lena blinked, confusion washing over her. "Paw at me? You mean Eli? He was just helping me through the crowd. I nearly tripped. He had his hands on you, Dante said. He took another step closer. Lena's back hit the edge of the desk. She was trapped. She looked up at him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He was just being nice. Lena whispered. Nice, Dante scoffed. He braced one hand on the desk beside her hip, leaning down. He was so close now that she could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, see the flecks of gold in his dark irises. Do not be naive, Lena. Men like that are never just being nice. Lena felt a flush rise from her chest to her neck. He had used her first name. He never used her first name, and he was angry. Why was he angry? Why does it matter? Lena asked, a sudden spark of courage igniting in her fear. I am just the accountant. No one cares who talks to me. Dante's eyes darkened. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back up to her eyes. The air between them crackled, thick and heavy with unspoken things. I care, he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. Lena stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to the scent of him and the warmth of his body blocking out the rest of the room. She saw his gaze drift down to her bare arms, to the skin Eli had touched. Dante leaned in further. For one wild, terrifying second, Lena thought he was going to kiss her. Her body betrayed her. She found herself leaning toward him, her lips parting slightly, her fear melting into a confusing, hot desire. She wanted him to close the gap. She wanted to know what that cruel, beautiful mouth felt like. Dante's hand twitched on the desk, his fingers curling into a fist as if he were fighting a war with himself. He inhaled sharply, filling his lungs with her scent, vanilla and something soft, like rain. Then the mask slammed back into place. Dante pulled back abruptly, turning his face away. The loss of his proximity left Lena cold. We are done here, he said, his voice flat and cold again. Go home, Miss Hart, and stay away from the security detail. They are here to work, not to socialize. Lena stood there for a moment, stunned and trembling. The rejection stung worse than a slap. She grabbed her tablet, mumbled a quick, "Good night, sir," and fled the office. Dante listened to her footsteps retreat down the hall. When the elevator doors finally slid shut, he let out a curse and swept the stack of files off his desk with a violent swing of his arm. Papers scattered across the floor like white feathers. He leaned heavily against the desk, staring at the empty doorway. He was in trouble, and he was in deep, dangerous trouble, and he knew, with a sinking certainty, that this was only the beginning. The change in the office ecosystem was immediate, surgical, and terrifyingly silent. On Wednesday morning, Eli Ward was gone. When Lena walked past the security station, expecting his easy smile and the crooked wave that had become the highlight of her mornings, she found a stranger sitting in his chair, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk and eyes that looked like they had seen things no human being should see. When she asked where Eli was, the answer was clipped and vague. Reassigned to perimeter logistics, South Side. Lena felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The Southside warehouses were notoriously miserable assignments, usually reserved for new hires or men who had screwed up. Eli had done nothing wrong. He'd only been kind to her. Before she could process the guilt, her desk phone rang. It was Dante's executive assistant, her voice tight. "Mister, Moretti needs the quarterly projections in his office. Now." This became the new normal. For 2 years, Lena had been a ghost in the machine of the Moretti group. Now, suddenly, she was the central cog. Dante cited security concerns and a need for absolute accuracy regarding the escalating tensions with the Navarro syndicate, but the logic felt thin. Every receipt, every invoice, every petty cash withdrawal now had to be physically walked into his office and placed directly into his hands. Lena spent more time in Dante's office in 3 days than she had in the previous 24 months combined. The atmosphere inside that room was suffocating. Dante worked with a terrifying intensity. He would sit behind his massive mahogany desk, sleeves rolled up, reading through the files she brought him. He rarely spoke unnecessary words, but his presence filled the room like a pressurized gas. Lena would stand by the edge of the desk, waiting for him to sign off on a transfer, and she could feel his eyes on her. It was not the leering look of the men at the docks. It was something heavier. It was a weight. Whenever she glanced up, he would be looking at her hands, or the line of her throat, or the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear. Every time their eyes met, he would not look away immediately. He would hold her gaze for 3, 4, 5 seconds, just long enough to make her breath hitch and her pulse scramble, before returning his attention to the paperwork with a scowl. She wondered if she was losing her mind. She wondered if she was imagining the heat in his eyes, projecting her own foolish crush onto a man who looked at spreadsheets with the same intensity he looked at her. But the world outside that office was darkening. The rumors of war were no longer just whispers in the break room. They were loud. Lena heard snippets of conversation in the hallways, missing shipments, drivers beaten up on the interstate, a fire at one of their holding facilities in Jersey. The name Navarro was spoken like a curse. Dante knew the danger better than anyone. He knew that by keeping Lena so close, by demanding her presence constantly. He was painting a target on her back. In the brutal calculus of his world, anyone who spent hours in the boss's office was assumed to be important. He told himself he was keeping her close to protect her, to keep an eye on her where he could ensure her safety. But deep down, in the parts of himself he refused to examine, he knew it was possession. He simply could not stand for her to be anywhere else. It was late on a Thursday evening when the tension finally snapped. The city outside was a grid of amber lights through the rain-streaked windows. Lena was sitting on the leather sofa in Dante's office, a laptop balanced on her knees. Surrounded by stacks of older ledgers, there was a discrepancy in the international shipping accounts, a complex shell game of moving funds that she could not untangle. Her eyes burned. She rubbed them roughly, sighing into the quiet room. "You are going to rub them raw," a voice said from above her. Lena jumped. She had not heard Dante move from his desk. He was standing right next to the sofa, looming over her. He had discarded his tie hours ago, and his shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing the hollow of his throat. He looked exhausted, the shadows under his eyes dark and bruised, but his gaze on her was alert. "I cannot find the entry for the harbor fees," Lena murmured, feeling suddenly self-conscious about her messy hair and the ink smudge on her finger. "The numbers do not balance, sir." Dante sat down next to her. He did not sit in the armchair opposite her. He sat right next to her on the sofa, the leather cushion dipped under his weight, shifting her gravity toward him. "Show me," he said. Lena turned the laptop toward him. To do so, she had to lean in, and suddenly, he was everywhere. She could smell him. Clean soap, expensive tobacco, and the sharp, metallic scent of rain. His arm brushed against hers as he reached for the trackpad. The contact was electric. It sent a jolt straight down her spine that made her toes curl in her shoes. "Here," Dante said, his voice low and rumbling in his chest. He pointed to a column. "My father set this up years ago. It is not a fee. It is a retainer for the customs union. It is listed under maintenance to keep the auditors happy." He began to explain the complex web of payouts and bribes that kept the Moretti ships moving. He spoke to her not as an underling, but almost as a partner. His tone was patient, unexpectedly gentle. He corrected her confusion without making her feel stupid. Lena watched his hand as he navigated the screen. His fingers were long and elegant, despite the violence she knew they were capable of. "You see," he asked, turning his head to look at her. He was inches away. Lena froze. She was looking directly into his eyes, seeing the flecks of gold and green in the dark brown. She could see the pores of his skin, the faint scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "Yes," she whispered, her voice failing her. "I see." Dante did not look back at the screen. His gaze dropped to her lips. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was sure he could hear it. She wanted him to lean in. She wanted it with a desperation that terrified her. Dante's eyes darkened. His nostrils flared slightly. He looked like a man starving to death who had just been placed in front of a banquet. Then, the phone on his desk rang. The shrill sound shattered the moment like a hammer through glass. Dante flinched, a look of pure annoyance crossing his face. He stood up abruptly, the warmth of his body vanishing, leaving Lena cold and shivering. He answered the phone with a barked, "What?" Lena scrambled to gather her files. She needed to put some distance between them. Her hands were shaking. She stood up and walked to the filing cabinet in the corner to retrieve the physical folder for the customs account. Her mind was reeling. He had wanted to kiss her. She was sure of it. Or was she crazy? She yanked the heavy metal drawer open with too much force. It stuck, then gave way. As she shoved the file in, her hand slipped. The sharp, raw metal edge of the drawer sliced across the fleshy part of her palm. Lena gasped, clutching her hand to her chest. Dante slammed the phone down. He turned, his instincts honed by a lifetime of violence, instantly scanning for a threat. When he saw Lena holding her hand, seeing the bright red blood welling up between her fingers, his expression shifted from aggression to something bordering on panic. What happened? He was across the room in 2 strides. "I cut it," Lena stammered, embarrassed. "It is stupid. The drawer." "Let me see." He did not ask. He took her wrist in a grip that was firm but incredibly careful. He pulled her hand away from her chest. The cut was shallow but long, and it was bleeding freely, the red drops falling onto the expensive Persian rug. Dante did not care about the rug. He cursed softly in Italian. "Come." He led her into the private bathroom attached to his office. It was a space of black marble and gold fixtures, smelling faintly of his cologne. He turned on the tap, testing the water temperature until it was lukewarm, then guided her hand under the stream. The water turned pink as it washed away the blood. Lena watched the water swirl down the drain, unable to look at him. This was too intimate. Standing in his bathroom, with him holding her hand so tenderly, felt more dangerous than the gun she knew he kept in his desk. Dante reached into the cabinet and pulled out a first aid kit. He dried her hand with a plush towel, dabbing at the skin with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size. "This will sting," he warned, uncapping a bottle of antiseptic. He looked at her then, waiting for her permission. Lena nodded. He applied the liquid. Lena hissed in a breath, her body tensing. Dante's hand tightened on her wrist, grounding her. "I have you," he murmured. "It is okay." He placed a sterile pad over the cut and began to wrap it with gauze. He worked with the efficiency of a man who had bandaged wounds before, likely bullet holes and knife slashes, not paper cuts and drawer mishaps. His thumb brushed over the sensitive skin of her inner wrist, right over her pulse point. He must have felt how fast her heart was beating. He finished the knot and did not let go. He stood there, holding her bandaged hand in his. The bathroom was small, the fluorescent light humming above them. They were so close that the tips of her shoes touched the tips of his. Lena looked up. Dante was staring at her mouth again. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris. His chest rose and fell in a jagged rhythm. "Lena," he said. It was not a question. It was a warning. He lifted his hand, the free one, and for a heart-stopping second, his fingers hovered near her jaw. He wanted to touch her. She could see the war waging behind his eyes, the battle between the man who wanted to take and the man who needed to protect. Lena leaned in, just a fraction, an invitation. Dante leaned down. His breath ghosted across her cheek, hot and fast. His lips were millimeters from hers. She closed her eyes, surrendering. Then he froze. He pulled back sharply, as if he had been burned. He dropped her hand and stepped back, putting 3 feet of distance between them. His jaw was clenched so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. "We cannot do this," he said, his voice rough, like gravel grinding together. "Why?" Lena whispered, her voice trembling. "Because you do not know what you are asking for," Dante said harshly. He turned his back to her, gripping the edge of the sink until his knuckles turned white. "I cannot afford distractions. Not now. Not with you." The rejection was physical. It hit Lena in the chest. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling foolish and small. "Go back to your desk," Dante said to the mirror, refusing to look at her reflection. "Finish the file, then go home." The next 48 hours were a blur of cold shoulders and silence. but the world outside would not let them simmer in their awkwardness. On Saturday morning, a car belonging to one of the Moretti captains was riddled with machine gun fire while parked in front of a bakery. 2 hours later, the receptionist at the main building received a call. A synthesized voice simply said, "We know about the girl." Dante did not hesitate. He stormed out of his office, flanked by 3 guards. He walked straight to Lena's cubicle. The entire floor went silent. "Pack your things," he commanded. Lena looked up, startled. "What? Am I being fired?" "You are being moved," Dante said. He did not care who was listening. "There is a credible threat. I am not taking chances. You are coming with me." "Where?" Lena asked, standing up, her defiance rising to meet his command. "My place," Dante said, "until this cools down. It is not a request. Lena, grab your laptop. We leave in 5 minutes." He turned and walked away, expecting her to follow. And because she was frightened, and because part of her thrilled at the idea of him protecting her, she did. Dante's penthouse was not what she expected. She had anticipated a cold, sterile fortress, glass, chrome, and black leather. A place where a criminal mastermind slept but did not live. Instead, when the private elevator opened into the top floor of the Spire building, she walked into a home. The floors were warm oak, covered in faded, intricate rugs. There was a massive bookshelf covering one entire wall, stuffed not with hollow decorative books, but with well-read paperbacks, history, philosophy, even some classic novels. There was a kitchen that looked used, with a copper pot hanging from a rack and a half-empty bag of high-end coffee beans on the counter. But what struck her most were the photos. On the mantel above the fireplace, there were framed pictures, a black-and-white photo of a stern-looking woman, his mother, and several candid shots of a young girl with Dante's dark eyes, laughing. "His sister, this is nice," Lena said, standing in the middle of the living room, clutching her bag. Dante was locking the elevator panel with a keypad. "It is secure," he said, ignoring the compliment. "The glass is bulletproof. The doors are reinforced steel. No one gets in unless I let them in. The guest room is down the hall on the left. Stay away from the windows." He left her there, retreating into what was clearly his bedroom to take a call. That night, the wind howled around the skyscraper, rattling the heavy panes of glass. Lena could not sleep. The guest bed was comfortable, the sheets softer than anything she had ever owned, but her mind was racing. She was sleeping in Dante Moretti's house. At 2 a.m, a loud crash echoed from the living room. Lena bolted upright. Her heart leaped into her throat. Had they found them? Was someone in the house? She scrambled out of bed, adrenaline flooding her veins. She threw open the bedroom door and ran into the hallway. Dante was already there. He was in a combat stance, a matte black handgun raised and steady. He was sweeping the room, his movements precise and lethal, but he was not wearing his suit. He was wearing a pair of gray sweatpants and a thin white t-shirt that clung to his chest. His feet were bare. His hair was messy from sleep. "Clear," he said, lowering the gun slightly as he saw her. He walked over to the kitchen area. A heavy ceramic vase had fallen off a side table, likely vibrations from the wind or the building settling. It lay in shards on the floor. "Just a vase," Dante said, engaging the safety on the weapon and setting it on the counter. He looked at Lena. She realized suddenly that she was wearing only an oversized sleep shirt that came to her mid-thigh. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and incredibly intimate. Dante did not look away this time. He looked her up and down, his gaze heavy and slow. The gun was on the counter, but the danger was still there, shifting from physical violence to emotional volatility. I thought someone broke in," Lena whispered, hugging her arms. "No one gets in," Dante repeated. "I told you. You are safe here." He grabbed a broom to sweep up the shards. The domesticity of the act, the feared mafia boss sweeping up broken pottery in his sweatpants, did something to Lena's chest. It cracked the image of the monster and showed the man. "I will make coffee," he said, abandoning the sleep he clearly wasn't going to get back. 10 minutes later, They sat at the kitchen island. The city lights were a blur below them. The coffee was strong and black. Dante sat on a stool, leaning forward on his elbows. The t-shirt stretched tight across his back. He looked human. He looked tired. "Why did you bring me here, Dante?" Lena asked softly. "Really? You have safe houses. You have hotels. Why here?" Dante stared into his mug. The steam curled up around his face. "Because," he said, his voice low, "I do not trust anyone else to watch you." "But why?" Lena pressed. "I am just an accountant. If I die, you can hire another one tomorrow." Dante looked up. His eyes were fierce. "Do not say that." He reached out, his hand covering hers on the countertop. His palm was rough, warm, and large enough to engulf hers completely. "You are not just an accountant," he said. "Not to me." He took a breath, struggling with the words. "I do not like the idea of anyone else laying a hand on what is under my protection, whether it is Eli or Navarro or anyone. You are mine to guard." Lena bristled slightly at the phrasing. "Under your protection? Is that what I am? Property?" Dante's fingers tightened on hers. "No, that is not what I meant." He leaned in, the air between them charging with static again. The smell of coffee and sleep and warm man filled her senses. "I mean that when I saw that man touch you at the party, I wanted to break his arm," Dante confessed, the truth tearing out of him. "And when I think about Navarro getting near you, it makes me want to burn this whole city to the ground." Lena's breath hitched. It was a confession of madness, but it was also the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. "Dante," she whispered. He looked at her, his eyes searching her face, looking for fear. He found none. He found only a reflection of his own hunger. He leaned forward. This time, he did not pull back immediately. He let the moment stretch, the tension pulling taut like a violin string about to snap. Then, he blinked. The wall came back up. He pulled his hand away and stood up, grabbing his coffee mug. "Drink your coffee," he said, his voice clipped. "We have work to do in the morning. And stay away from the windows." He turned and walked back to his bedroom, leaving Lena alone in the kitchen, her skin still burning where he had touched her, her heart racing with the terrifying realization that she was falling in love with a man who might get her killed. And worse, she suspected he was falling for her, too. The penthouse at the top of the Spire building was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended 1,000 feet above the grime of the city. For the first 3 days, Lena moved through it like a guest, afraid of breaking the furniture. By the second week, however, the terrified silence had evolved into a strange, rhythmic domesticity that was almost more unsettling than the fear. Proximity was a powerful solvent. It dissolved the mystique of Dante Moretti, the untouchable crime lord, and revealed the man beneath the suit. Lena saw him in the mornings, before the armor was strapped on. She saw him standing at the kitchen island at 6 o'clock, staring blindly into a tablet while he drank black coffee, his hair damp from the shower, the dark circles under his eyes speaking of insomnia. She saw the way he rolled his neck when a migraine hit him in the afternoon. She saw the sheer, crushing weight of the organization resting on his shoulders. One Tuesday evening, Lena walked into the living room to ask about a discrepancy in the payroll files. She froze in the doorway. Dante was sitting in the leather armchair, a laptop balanced on his knees, engaged in a video call. He was not barking orders or threatening rivals. His voice was pitched low, soft and rumbling. "You take the time you need." "Marco," Dante was saying, "I do not care what the doctor says about the timeline. If you cannot walk yet, you do not work. The bills are covered." Lena could hear a tinny voice responding on the other end, sounding tearful and grateful. "Your daughter starts school next month, right?" Dante asked. "Tell her Uncle Dante sent a gift. It will be there tomorrow. Now rest." He ended the call and rubbed his face with his hands, letting out a long, heavy sigh. When he looked up and saw Lena standing there, the mask snapped back into place instantly, his expression hardening, but it was too late. She had seen it. "Is everything okay?" Lena asked, stepping into the room. "One of my drivers," Dante said, his voice clipped. "He took a bullet in the leg last week. He is worried about losing his spot on the roster." You are paying for his recovery? Lena asked. He took the bullet for me, Dante said, as if it were the simplest equation in the world. He turned his attention back to his screen. What did you need? Lena? Lena stared at him for a moment longer. The ruthlessness was there, yes, but beneath it was a fierce, tribal loyalty that confused her moral compass. I wanted to know if you wanted dinner. She lied. The payroll question could wait. Dante looked at her, surprised. You are cooking? I am tired of takeout, Lena said, feeling a sudden surge of boldness. And you look like you have not eaten a real vegetable in 3 years. An hour later, the penthouse smelled of garlic, basil, and roasting tomatoes. Lena made a simple pasta dish, something her grandmother used to make. When she set the bowl in front of Dante at the kitchen island, he looked at it with a strange expression. He picked up his fork, took a bite, and chewed slowly. For a moment, the silence stretched, heavy and thick. Then, Dante's shoulders dropped an inch. The lines of tension around his eyes smoothed out. My mother, he said quietly. She used to make this sauce. She put a little cinnamon in it. Lena smiled, leaning her hip against the counter. That is the secret. Just a pinch. Dante looked up at her. The guarded, cold stare was gone. In its place was something naked and hungry, a look of profound loneliness that had been briefly alleviated. Thank you. Lena, he said. It was the way he said her name, reverent, quiet, that made her heart stumble. Later that night, Lena fell asleep on the sofa while reviewing security audits on her laptop. She woke up hours later in the dark, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. A heavy wool blanket had been tucked carefully around her shoulders. Her laptop was closed and set on the coffee table, plugged in to charge. She touched the soft wool, her chest tightening. He must have done it silently, careful not to wake her. The image of Dante Moretti, the man who terrified half the city, tiptoeing around a sleeping accountant to make sure she was warm, made it impossible to breathe. They were two people on opposite sides of a war, trapped in a glass box, slowly forgetting why they were supposed to be enemies. But the war outside did not stop just because the coffee was warm. The conflict with the Navarro syndicate was bleeding money. Dante needed to know where the leaks were coming from, and he trusted no one but Lena to find them. He gave her access to the archives, the deep, dusty digital records that went back a decade. On Thursday, Lena was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through a digitized ledger from 7 years ago. Dante was in the shower. The penthouse was quiet. She was tracking a series of shell companies used to launder collection money. It was tedious work, matching tax ID numbers to vague LLC names. She clicked on a folder labeled Vanguard Holdings. It was a subsidiary the Moretti family had used for neighborhood protection rackets before Dante had fully taken over, back when his father was still alive. She scanned the list of businesses that had paid into Vanguard: bakeries, laundromats, repair shops. Her finger froze on the trackpad. There, on line 412, Hart Hardware, 424 Elm Street. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Lena stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice. Hart Hardware was her father's store. She remembered that year. She was 23, just out of college. Her father had suddenly stopped smiling. He had started coming home late, looking gray and beaten. The store, which had been the pride of his life, started hemorrhaging money. He told her it was the economy. He told her it was bad luck. But the numbers on the screen told a different story. Aggressive collection fee, $5,000 monthly. Penalty for late payment, 15% interest, asset seizure, inventory liquidation. Lena read the notes attached to the file. Subject resisted payment. Sent enforcement team. Subject complied. Enforcement team. She remembered the night her father came home with a broken arm. He had told her he fell off a ladder. Lena put a hand over her mouth, a nauseating wave of realization crashing over her. He had not fallen. They had broken him. The stress of the debt, the fear, the shame. It had eaten him alive. He had a stroke 2 years later. The doctors said it was stress-induced hypertension. Dante's family had killed him. It did not matter if Dante himself had swung the bat, the money that paid for this penthouse. The money that bought the pasta she had cooked tonight was stained with her father's blood. The bathroom door opened. Steam billowed out. Dante walked into the living room, wearing loose sweatpants and a towel around his neck, looking relaxed for the first time in days. "Did you find the transfer?" he asked, running a hand through his damp hair. Lena slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Lena?" Dante paused, sensing the shift instantly. "No," she said. Her voice was unrecognizable, cold, flat, dead. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed." She stood up, refusing to look at him. She walked past him, keeping a wide berth as if his touch might burn her skin. Dante watched her go, confusion knitting his brow. "Good night?" She slammed her bedroom door and locked it. For the next 2 days, the penthouse became a tomb. Lena retreated behind a wall of ice. She spoke only when spoken to. And even then, her answers were monosyllabic. Yes, no, I do not know. She avoided his eyes. She stopped cooking. She spent her time in the guest room with the door closed. Dante was bewildered. He was used to enemies he could shoot, problems he could solve with money or violence. He did not know how to handle the sudden, inexplicable coldness of the woman he was secretly starting to adore. He tried to ask her. She deflected. He brought her coffee. She left it to go cold. The tension built until the air in the penthouse felt pressurized, explosive. It finally detonated on Saturday night. Lena was in the kitchen, getting a glass of water. She moved stiffly, her shoulders hunched. Dante walked in, having just finished a call with his captains. He had reached his limit. "Stop," he said. Lena did not turn around. "Excuse me, stop acting like this," Dante said. He walked around the island, blocking her path. "You have barely looked at me in 48 hours. What did I do? Did I say something? I'm just working?" "Sir," Lena said, staring at the middle button of his shirt. "Stop calling me sir," Dante snapped. His patience, frayed by the war with Navarro, finally snapped. "Talk to me, Lena. We were fine. We were good. And now you look at me like I am a disease. What changed?" Lena gripped the glass so hard her knuckles turned white. The anger she had been suppressing, the grief for her father, the betrayal of her own heart, it all boiled over. "Maybe I just remembered who you are," she said, her voice shaking with venom. Dante stepped back, stung. "And who am I?" "You are a criminal." "Dante," she spat, finally looking up at him. Her hazel eyes were wet with furious tears. "You ruin people's lives and you call it business. You sit up here in your glass tower and you play God with people who are just trying to survive." Dante's face hardened. He stepped closer, his own temper rising to meet hers. "I never lied to you about what I am." "No, you did not." Lena laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. "You just let me forget it. You let me think you were different. But you are not. You're just like the rest of them. You take whatever you want, and you do not care who breaks." "Is that what you think?" Dante asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. He was close now, crowding her against the counter. "You think I do not care? You think I take what I want?" "Yes," Lena shouted. "If I took what I wanted," Dante said, his voice rough with emotion, "I would not have spent the last 2 weeks sleeping down the hall while I go out of my mind thinking about you." The silence that followed was deafening. Lena stared at him, her breath hitching in her throat, the anger drained out of her face, replaced by shock. Dante looked just as shocked as she was. He had not meant to say it, but now that it was out, he could not pull it back. The dam had broken. He stepped closer, invading her space, his control disintegrating. "You think I do not notice," he whispered. "You think I do not see you? I see nothing else. Since the moment you walked into my office 2 years ago, I have been fighting this. And when I saw that man touch you," he cut himself off, shaking his head. "I wanted to kill him," he admitted, his voice raw, "because he could touch you, and I knew I couldn't." Lena's eyes searched his face. She saw the torture there. She saw the man who was drowning. And God help her, despite the file, despite her father, despite everything, she wanted to save him. Dante. She breathed. He reached out. His hands were shaking slightly. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the angry tears on her cheeks. "Tell me to stop," he rasped. "Tell me to leave, Lena, and I will walk out that door." She knew she should. She should push him away and scream about her father, but she didn't. She couldn't. She tilted her head up, her lips parting. Dante made a low sound in his throat and crashed his mouth down onto hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was an explosion. It was the taste of 2 years of silence and 3 days of anger. It was desperate, messy, and all-consuming. Lena gasped against his mouth, clutching the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. Dante groaned, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly, pressing her back against the edge of the counter. He kissed her like he was dying, and she was the only air left in the room. His hands were everywhere, in her hair, on her waist, gripping her as if he were terrified she would vanish if he let go. Lena matched his intensity, her fingers digging into his shoulders, the chemistry between them, bottled up for so long, erupted with a force that frightened them both. They broke apart for a second to breathe, foreheads resting against each other, panting. "Lena," Dante whispered, his voice wrecked. "Lena," he kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. His tongue swept into her mouth, tasting her, claiming her. It was a kiss of possession, but also of surrender. He was giving her everything, his control, his power, his heart. For a minute, there was nothing but the heat of his skin and the rough drag of his stubble against her chin. Lena lost herself in it. She forgot the file. She forgot the past. Then, reality clawed its way back in. The image of her father's broken arm flashed behind her eyelids. Lena stiffened. A wave of nausea rolled over her. What was she doing? She was kissing the man who represented everything that had destroyed her family. She was betraying her father's memory with every beat of her heart. She pulled back abruptly, shoving against Dante's chest. "No," she gasped. Dante froze. He looked at her, his eyes black with desire, his chest heaving. "Lena, I can't," Lena cried, scrambling away from him. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, looking at him with wide, horrified eyes. "I can't do this." Dante reached for her. "Lena, wait, do not touch me," she screamed, backing toward the hallway. "I cannot be another person you destroy. Dante, I just can't." She turned and ran. She fled down the hallway, into her room, and locked the door with trembling hands. She slid down to the floor, burying her face in her knees, sobbing. Dante stood alone in the kitchen. The silence of the penthouse rushed back in, louder than before. He gripped the edge of the granite counter until his knuckles cracked. He could still taste her on his lips. Her scent was on his shirt. He had finally let himself want something. He had finally opened the door he had kept bolted for years, and it had blown up in his face. He did not understand what she meant. "Another person you destroy." He grabbed a crystal whiskey glass from the tray on the counter and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the far wall, raining diamonds onto the floor. Dante leaned his head back, closing his eyes, listening to the pounding of his own heart. He was a fool, a dangerous, lovesick fool. While Dante stood in the wreckage of his kitchen, 5 miles away, in a dimly lit warehouse on the waterfront, a phone vibrated. A man sat in the shadows of a parked car. He checked the screen. He was a captain in the Moretti organization, a man Dante had trusted for years, a man who had sat at Dante's table and sworn loyalty on his mother's grave. Rico. He typed a message into the encrypted app. "He's distracted. The girl has him twisted up. He's not watching the logistics. Now is the time." The reply came back 3 seconds later from the Navarro syndicate. "Get us the route for the shipment. We will take care of the rest. And bring us the girl." Rico smiled in the darkness. He deleted the message and started the car. The king of Harbor Point was falling, and it was all because of a quiet accountant with hazel eyes. The morning sun that filtered into the penthouse was gray and unforgiving, stripping away the golden warmth of the previous night's intimacy. It exposed the dust motes dancing in the air and the stark reality of the papers trembling in Lena Hart's hands. She had not slept. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her face pale and drawn, but her posture was rigid with a terrible resolve. She sat at the marble dining table, the file open in front of her. Dante walked into the room at 7 o'clock. He looked as though he had not slept either. He wore fresh trousers and a crisp white shirt, but he had not bothered with a tie or a jacket. He stopped when he saw her, hope warring with caution in his dark eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to apologize for the kiss or to ask if they could move past it. But Lena cut him off before he could make a sound. "Sit down," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it had the brittle quality of dead leaves. Dante frowned, his instincts pricking. He walked slowly to the table and sat opposite her. "What is this?" "Lena." Lena spun the laptop around so he could see the screen. Next to it, she placed a printed stack of invoices she had pulled from the archives. Vanguard Holdings. She said. Dante looked at the name. He nodded slowly. "A shell company. We shut it down 3 years ago. It was inefficient." "It was not inefficient," Lena said, her voice shaking. "It was predatory. Look at the client list. Dante. Look at line 412. Dante leaned forward. He scanned the lines of data until his eyes landed on the entry she was pointing to. Hart Hardware. He froze. The silence that descended on the room was heavy enough to crush bone. He read the collection notes, the escalation protocols, the asset seizure date. He looked at the date of the final liquidation. It was 5 years ago. Lena watched him read. She watched the color drain from his face as he made the connection. "That was my father," she whispered. Dante looked up, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked genuinely horrified. "Lena." "He owned that store for 30 years, she continued, the words spilling out like blood from a wound. "He built it from nothing. Then a man came in one day and said he needed to pay for protection. My father said no. 2 weeks later, his windows were smashed. A month later, a fire started in the storage room. He paid then. He paid until he could not pay anymore. And when the money ran out, your people took the inventory. They took the building. They broke his arm in the alley behind the shop to make sure he understood the lesson." Dante reached across the table, his hand hovering as if he wanted to touch her, but knew he had lost the right. "I did not know, but it was you," Lena said, tears finally spilling over. "It was Moretti money. Moretti men. It was my father," Dante said, his voice rough and urgent. "Look at the dates. Lena, 5 years ago. Giovanni was still running the streets. I was in Chicago running the distribution hubs. I did not order this. But you knew." She accused. "You knew this is how the family made its money. You knew about Vanguard." "Yes," Dante admitted, the single word dropping like a stone. "I knew we had collection rackets. I knew we squeezed people who could not pay, but I did not know it was your family. I did not know it was you." "Does that matter?" Lena demanded, standing up so abruptly her chair screeched against the floor. "Does it matter that you did not know my specific name? You knew it was someone's father, someone's life. You sit here in this penthouse wearing these suits, pretending to be a businessman. But the foundation of this whole life is built on broken bones and ruined families." Dante stood up too, moving around the table. He looked desperate. A man trying to stop a dam from bursting with his bare hands. "I am trying to change it," he said. "Why do you think I shut Vanguard down? Why do you think I moved us into legitimate logistics? I have spent every day since I took the chair trying to steer this ship away from the gutter without starting a war that kills everyone I love. It takes time. Lena, you cannot turn a beast like this around in a day." To Lena, it sounded like justification. It sounded like the same corporate lies she had heard from the bank when they foreclosed on her father's house. "It is too late for me," she said, clutching the edge of the table. "Every time I look at you now, I see the man who killed my father. The stress killed him. Dante. The shame killed him. And I have been sitting here, cooking you dinner, letting you touch me." She choked on a sob, wrapping her arms around her stomach. "I feel sick. I cannot be here. I cannot be near you." She turned and walked toward the guest room. "Lena, stop," Dante commanded, moving to block her path. "Get out of my way," she said. "You cannot leave," Dante said, his voice hardening with panic. "The threat from Navarro is still active. You are not safe out there. "I am not safe here," she shouted. The raw pain in her voice stopped him cold. "I am not safe with you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You are the danger. Dante, you always were. I was just too stupid to see it because I wanted you to be a hero." Dante stood there, paralyzed. He could stop her. He could lock the doors, order the guards to keep her inside, force her to be safe. It would be the smart thing to do. It would be the Moretti thing to do. But if he did that, he would prove her right. He would be the monster she saw. He stepped aside. The gesture was small, but it cost him everything. He moved out of her path, leaving the way to the door open. "If you walk out that door," Dante said, his voice sounding hollowed out, "I cannot guarantee I can get to you if something happens. I will take my chances," Lena said. She went into the room and packed her bag in 3 minutes. She did not take the clothes he had bought her. She took her old gray cardigan, her worn satchel, and her laptop. When she walked back out, Dante was standing by the window, his back to her, looking out at the city he ruled but could not control. "Goodbye, Dante," she said. He did not turn around. He could not watch her leave. The elevator doors slid shut, severing the connection between them. Down on the street, the air was cold and smelled of exhaust and damp pavement. Lena walked out of the Spire building, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand. She felt stripped raw, as if she had left a vital part of her organs on the penthouse floor. She hugged her cardigan tighter around herself and started walking toward the subway station 2 blocks away. She needed to go to her apartment, grab her passport, and leave the city. Maybe she would go to her aunt in Ohio, anywhere that wasn't Harbor Point. "Lena!" She flinched, looking up. Standing near the corner, dressed in a thick windbreaker and a baseball cap, was Eli Ward. He looked different out of his suit, rougher, less polished. He had a coffee cup in one hand and looked surprised to see her. "Eli," Lena breathed, "what are you doing here?" "Reassignment," Eli said with a grimace. "Boss put me on perimeter watch. Basically, I stand on the corner and make sure no one suspicious looks at the building. It is the penalty box." He looked at her face, seeing the red eyes and the trembling chin. "Hey," he said, his voice dropping into that warm, protective cadence she remembered from the party. "You look like you have been through hell. Did something happen?" "I quit," Lena said, her voice cracking. "I am going home." Eli frowned, glancing up at the penthouse balcony towering above them. "By yourself? In this neighborhood? Come on, I will walk you to the train. I do not want to get you in trouble," Lena said. "I am already in the penalty box." Eli grinned. Though the smile did not quite reach his eyes, he tossed his coffee into a trash can. "Let's go." He fell into step beside her. Just having him there, a normal, decent man who had been kind to her, made Lena want to weep with relief. They reached the intersection of 4th and Grand. The street was relatively empty, save for a group of men loitering near a delivery van. They were loud, laughing and shoving each other. Eli's posture changed instantly. The easygoing slouch vanished, replaced by the rigid tension of a soldier. "Stay on my right," he murmured. He reached out and touched her elbow, guiding her subtly away from the group. It was the same gesture he had used at the party. Gentle, respectful, protective. It triggered a memory of Dante's dark eyes watching her, of his confession in the kitchen. "I wanted to kill him because he could touch you." Lena's heart twisted. The van's side door slid open with a violent metallic screech. The group of men stopped laughing. In a split second, they produced masks and weapons. "Get back!" Eli shouted, shoving Lena behind him. He moved with incredible speed, drawing a concealed baton from his jacket, but he was outnumbered 5-1. The first attacker lunged. Eli cracked him across the jaw, sending him sprawling, but 2 more tackled him from the sides. "Run!" "Lena!" Eli roared. Lena turned to run, but a pair of arms clamped around her waist from behind. She screamed, thrashing, her fingernails clawing at the leather of the man's jacket. She saw Eli go down, struck hard in the temple with the butt of a pistol. He crumpled to the pavement, blood pooling instantly under his head. "Eli!" she screamed. A gloved hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her cry into a terrified whimper. The smell of stale tobacco and leather filled her nose. She was lifted off her feet and thrown bodily into the back of the dark van. She hit the metal floor hard, the impact knocking the wind out of her before she could scramble up. The door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness. The tires squealed, and the van lurched forward, throwing her against the wall, high above, in the penthouse. Dante Moretti was pouring himself a drink he did not want. His phone buzzed on the counter. It was the emergency line. He answered it, his hand tightening on the glass. "Report, sir." The voice of his head of security was frantic. "We have a situation on Sector 4. Officer Ward is down, severe head trauma, and—" Dante's blood ran cold. "And what?" "They took her." The voice said, "A black van. Navarro plates. They took Miss Hart." The glass in Dante's hand did not just break. It exploded. Shards of crystal sliced into his palm, but he did not feel it. He stared at the wall, his vision tunneling. She'd been gone for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. He had let her walk out. He had opened the door. A roar of pure, animalistic rage tore out of his throat. He swept the expensive bottle of scotch, the lamp, and a stack of books off the counter, sending them crashing to the floor. He braced his hands on the granite, breathing like a dying man. The image of Lena, brave, stubborn, hazel-eyed Lena, being dragged into a van by Navarro's butchers, burned itself into his brain. Then, as quickly as the fire had come, it turned to ice. Dante straightened up. He ignored the blood dripping from his hand onto the floor. His face settled into a mask of terrifying calm. "Get the car," he said into the phone, "and wake everyone up. We're going to war." Lena did not know how long she'd been in the van. Time dissolved into the vibrations of the road and the thudding of her own heart. When the vehicle finally stopped, she was hauled out, a hood thrown over her head. She was dragged through a building that smelled of dust, oil, and salt water, a warehouse. They pushed her into a chair. Rough hands used zip ties to bind her wrists behind her back. The hood was ripped off. Lena blinked against the harsh glare of a single overhead bulb. She was in a small, windowless concrete room. Standing in front of her was a man with a jagged scar running from his ear to his chin. She recognized him from the police files Dante had shown her. This was Silas, the Navarro underboss, a man known for using pliers before he asked questions. "Well," Silas said, smiling a smile that did not reach his dead eyes, "you are prettier than the pictures." Lena swallowed her terror. She forced herself to breathe. She was an accountant. She dealt with facts. Fact 1, screaming would not help. Fact 2, she was valuable. "I do not know anything," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I am just the bookkeeper." Silas laughed. He pulled up a metal chair and sat backward on it, facing her. "Do not insult me, sweetheart. You have been living in Moretti's penthouse for 2 weeks. You have been in his office every day. You know where the money is. And more importantly, you know where the shipments are going." He leaned in. "We know Dante is moving a massive shipment of electronics and uncut gems this Friday. We know he is using a new route to avoid our patrols. You are going to tell me what that route is." Lena's mind raced. She did know. Dante had shown her the logistics just last night. The shipment was going through the North Pass, disguised as medical supplies. If she told them, Navarro would hijack it. Dante would lose millions. His reputation would be shattered. The family might collapse. It would be justice. A small voice in her head whispered, "Justice for your father." But then she pictured Dante. Not the boss, but the man who had swept up the broken vase, the man who had bandaged her hand, the man who had let her go because she asked him to. If she told them, Dante would walk into a trap trying to defend the shipment. They would kill him. She looked at Silas. She thought of her father, who had been a proud man. He had raised her to be honest, but he had also raised her to be loyal to the people she loved. And God help her. She loved the monster. "I do not know the exact coordinates." Lena lied. She injected just enough tremor into her voice to make it sound like fear rather than deception. "But I saw the files. They are not using the North Pass." Silas narrowed his eyes. "Where then?" "The West Highway," Lena said. "The old distribution center near the airport. They are using rental trucks to blend in." It was a lie. The West Highway route had been abandoned months ago because of police activity. If Navarro sent his men there, they would be miles away from the real shipment, and they might run right into a SWAT team. Silas studied her face. He looked for the twitch of a lie. Lena held his gaze, channeling all her hatred for him, all her fear, and letting it look like submission. West Highway, Silas muttered. Less. That makes sense. Less surveillance. He stood up and walked to the door. Keep her here. If the info is good, maybe we just ransom her. If she lied, well, we can always have some fun before we send her back in pieces. He slammed the heavy metal door, locking it from the outside. Lena slumped in the chair, the adrenaline draining out of her, leaving her shaking uncontrollably. She was alone. She was tied up in a warehouse with killers. She had just lied to a cartel boss. She closed her eyes and pictured Dante. She remembered the feel of his rough hands on her face, the way he had looked at her in the kitchen, like she was the only source of light in his dark world. "I am sorry, Papa," she whispered into the silence of the room. "I'm so sorry." She knew she should hate Dante Moretti. She knew she should hop Navarro burned his empire to ash. But as she sat there in the dark, shivering and bruised, she knew with absolute clarity that she would lie, steal, and bleed if it meant keeping Dante alive long enough to save her. She just hoped he was coming, because if he wasn't, she was going to die in this chair. Across the city, in the armory below the Moretti Tower, Dante was strapping a Kevlar vest over his chest. He checked the magazine of his pistol and slammed it home. His face was a stone mask. There was no anger left in him, only a cold, mechanical drive. "Find the van," he said to the room full of armed men. "Find the warehouse, and kill anyone who stands between me and her." He was not doing this for the business. He was not doing this for the name. He was doing it because she was his. And the world was about to learn exactly what happened when someone touched what belonged to Dante Moretti. The city of Harbor Point had never seen Dante Moretti like this. For 10 years, since he had taken the throne of the Moretti organization, Dante had been a creature of ice. He was calculated, patient, and terrifyingly pragmatic. He did not act on emotion, he acted on logistics, but for the last 6 hours, the ice had shattered, revealing a core of volcanic, destructive heat that frightened even his most loyal soldiers. The Moretti headquarters was a hive of frantic, violent activity. Men in tactical gear ran through the corridors. Analysts were glued to monitors, scrubbing traffic camera footage frame by frame. The air smelled of stale coffee, gun oil, and fear. Dante stood in the center of the war room, his sleeves rolled up, his forearms smeared with grime. He had not sat down since the call came in. He had personally visited 3 low-level informants in the last hour, men who usually dealt with street captains, not the boss himself. He had not touched them, but he had leaned close, his voice a whisper of pure death, and promised them that if they did not tell him where the Navarro vans were operating, he would burn their entire blocks to the ground. They had talked. They had given him scraps, whispers of a safe house near the industrial shipyards, but it was not enough. "Sir," the head of intelligence called out, his voice trembling slightly. "We have something." Dante was at the man's shoulder in a second. "Show me." It was grainy footage from a private security camera at a gas station on the edge of the warehouse district. A black van with mud-obscured plates rolled past, in the passenger window. For a split second, a flash of red hair. It was not Lena. It was one of the Navarro lieutenants, but the timing matched. "We have a location," the analyst said, typing furiously. "It is an old textile storage facility, Sector 4. It has been off the grid for years." Dante straightened up. He felt a vibration in his pocket. His phone. He ignored it. "Sector 4?" he repeated. "That is a maze. We need a precise entry point behind him." Eli Ward sat in a chair, holding an ice pack to the side of his head. His face was pale, his eyes unfocused from the concussion he had sustained, but he refused to go to the hospital. "I remember," Eli rasped. Dante turned to him. "What do you remember?" "The smell," Eli said, closing his eyes, trying to dig through the fog in his brain. "When they opened the door, it smelled like salt and sulfur, and I heard a crane, a squeaky crane." Dante looked at the map on the main screen. There was only one operational crane in Sector 4 that hadn't been serviced in a decade. It was near the East Dock. "That is it," Dante said. He turned to the room. "Gear up. We leave in 5 minutes." Rico, one of Dante's oldest captains, stepped forward. He was a broad man with a thick neck and a face that usually inspired confidence. Today, however, his eyes were shifting, nervous. "Boss," Rico said, keeping his voice low, "this is reckless. The advisors say it is a trap. Navarro knows you are coming. He wants you to walk into a kill zone." "I do not care what Navarro wants," Dante said, checking the load of his sidearm. "If we go in with the full force, they will see us coming and they might hurt the girl just to spite you," Rico argued. "We should split the team. I will take the heavy squad to the front to draw their fire. You take a small strike team around the back, through the drainage tunnels. It keeps you off the radar." Dante paused. Strategically, it made sense. A distraction would buy him time to find Lena before the shooting started. "Do it," Dante said, clapping a hand on Rico's shoulder. "Keep them busy. Rico, buy me 10 minutes. Rico nodded, looking down at the floor. 10 minutes. Consider it done." Dante did not see the slight, cold smile that touched Rico's lips as he turned away. He did not know that Rico had already texted the Navarro lieutenant, telling him exactly where Dante would be entering, and that he would be almost alone in the warehouse. Time had lost its meaning for Lena. Her wrists were raw from the zip ties. Her shoulder throbbed where she had been thrown against the van wall, but her mind was sharp, honed by terror and adrenaline. She had been left alone in the small concrete room for what felt like an hour. The guard outside the door was getting bored. She could hear him pacing, the scuff of his boots against the concrete. She heard the distinct chime of a mobile game, then a curse as he presumably lost a level. "Hey!" Lena shouted, her voice cracking. The door opened. A young man, barely 20, stepped in. He held a submachine gun loosely in one hand and a cheap burner phone in the other. "Shut up," he snapped. "No talking. I need water," Lena said, slumping forward in her chair. Feigning a faint, "Please, I'm going to pass out." The guard rolled his eyes. He stepped closer, looking at her with a mix of annoyance and pity. "Do not die on me. The boss wants you awake." He turned his back for a second to grab a bottle of water from a crate near the door. He set his phone down on a stack of pallets within arm's reach of Lena. It was a mistake born of inexperience. Lena did not hesitate. She lunged forward against her restraints, twisting her body violently. Her bound hands snatched the phone from the pallet. She slid it down behind her back, tucking it into the waistband of her skirt, just as the guard turned back around. "Here," he said, unscrewing the cap and holding it to her lips. Lena drank greedily, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought he would hear it. She choked down the water, gasping, "Thank you." The guard frowned, patting his pockets. "Where is my phone?" He looked at the pallet. He looked at the floor. Lena held her breath. If he searched her, she was dead. "I must have left it in the hall," he muttered, looking confused. He walked out, locking the door behind him. As soon as the bolt slid home, Lena began to work. Her fingers were numb and she could not see the screen. She had to navigate by tactile memory and luck. She managed to double-tap the side button to wake it. She hoped there was no passcode. She felt the haptic vibration of the unlock. She could not dial Dante's number. She did not have it memorized, and even if she did, Navarro might be monitoring the lines. She had to text someone who would know what to do, someone whose number was burned into her brain from processing payroll for 2 years. She typed a text to Marco, Dante's lieutenant, the one she had helped with the medical bills. She could not type a sentence. Her thumbs were clumsy behind her back, and she couldn't see the letters. She had to use the predictive text and numbers she knew by heart. Vanguard 412. Liquidation imminent, Sector 4. It was a Hail Mary. Vanguard 412, the code for her father's file, the symbol of their conflict, but also the only thing that would prove it was really her. Liquidation imminent meant she was in danger of being killed. Sector 4 was what she had heard the guards whispering. She hit send. She waited 10 seconds, then shoved the phone deep between the cushions of the old chair she was tied to. "Please," she whispered into the dark. "Please understand." Dante was in the passenger seat of an armored SUV, speeding through the rain-slicked streets of the industrial district. When Marco's phone pinged in the back seat, Marco looked at the screen and frowned. "Boss, I just got a text. Unknown number." Dante did not look back. "Ignore it." Marco hesitated. "It says, Vanguard 412. Dante froze. The car seemed to stop moving, even though the speedometer read 80 miles per hour. He snatched the phone from Marco's hand. Vanguard 412. Liquidation imminent, Sector 4. It was her. Only Lena knew that file number. She had thrown it in his face just this morning. The pain of that memory, her accusation, her grief, hit him like a physical blow, but it was instantly overwhelmed by a fierce, burning hope. "She is alive," Dante whispered, "and she is smart." He looked at the map. They were 2 minutes away from Sector 4. "She is telling us she is running out of time," Dante said, his voice hardening into steel. "Rico, are you in position?" Rico's voice crackled over the radio earbud. "We're at the front gate, boss. Ready to make noise on your command." Dante felt a strange prickle on the back of his neck. Something felt wrong. The timing, the ease of the approach. It was too smooth. But he could not stop. Lena was inside. "Execute," Dante ordered. "Ahead of them." The night exploded. Rico's team opened fire on the front of the warehouse. Tracers lit up the rain. The sound of heavy automatic weapons echoed off the shipping containers. "Go," Dante signaled to his driver. Their SUV peeled off the main road, bouncing over a curb and tearing down an alleyway toward the rear drainage entrance Rico had suggested. Dante, Marco, and 2 other elite enforcers bailed out of the car before it fully stopped. They moved through the shadows, silent and lethal. The rain soaked Dante's shirt, plastering it to his skin. He did not feel the cold. He felt only the crushing weight of his own guilt. "I let her walk away," he thought, the words looping in his mind like a curse. "I opened the door and let her walk right into this." He had tried to be noble. He had tried to give her a choice. But in his world, choices were a luxury that got people killed. He vowed silently and with terrifying intensity that if he got her back, he would never make that mistake again. He would give her the truth. He would give her an apology, and he would give her a way out. But he would never let her out of his sight until he knew, with absolute certainty, that she was safe. Even if it meant she hated him, they breached the rear door. The hallway was empty. Too empty. "This is wrong," Marco whispered, raising his rifle. "Where are the guards?" Dante moved forward, his pistol drawn. "Stay sharp." They turned a corner into a wide corridor lined with metal shelving. Suddenly, floodlights snapped on, blinding them. "Ambush!" Marco screamed. Gunfire erupted from the catwalks above. Dante threw himself behind a stack of crates as bullets chewed up the concrete where he had been standing a second ago. He returned fire, aiming at the muzzle flashes in the rafters. "They knew we were coming," one of the enforcers shouted. "Reloading. They knew the exact entry point." Dante realized with a sickening jolt that Rico had lied. The front assault wasn't a distraction. It was a corralling maneuver. Rico had funneled Dante's team into the kill box. "Push forward," Dante roared. "We have to get to the office." He broke cover, sprinting across the open gap. A bullet slammed into his shoulder. It felt like being hit with a sledgehammer. Dante spun, stumbling but kept his feet. The pain was white-hot, radiating down his arm, but he gritted his teeth and fired 3 shots at the shooter, watching the man fall from the catwalk. "Boss," Marco yelled. "I'm fine," Dante snarled. He checked his shoulder. It was a graze, deep, bleeding heavily, but it hadn't hit the bone. The adrenaline was already masking the worst of it. He could feel Lena. She was close. He knew it in his gut. He kicked open a door at the end of the corridor, shooting a guard who was raising a shotgun. The man went down. Dante moved through the facility like a wraith, leaving a trail of bodies behind him. He was not fighting for territory. He was fighting for his life and for hers. He reached a heavy steel door marked Storage 4. He didn't bother checking the handle. He fired 2 shots into the lock mechanism and kicked the door with all his remaining strength. It flew open. The room was dim. In the center, tied to a chair, sat Lena. She jerked her head up, her eyes wide with terror, when she saw him, soaked in rain and blood, his chest heaving, a gun in his hand. The terror broke, replaced by a look of such fierce, agonizing relief that it brought Dante to his knees. "Dante!" she sobbed. He was there in an instant. He holstered his weapon and pulled a knife from his belt, slashing the zip ties on her wrists and ankles. As soon as her hands were free, she didn't run. She threw herself at him. Dante caught her, pulling her against his chest with his good arm. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of her fear and her skin. She was shaking violently, clinging to his shirt, her fingers digging into the fabric. "I have you," he choked out. His voice wrecked. "I have you. Lena." He pulled back just enough to look at her. Her face was bruised, her lip was split. Rage, pure and black, flared in his chest, but he pushed it down. He needed her to know she was safe. He cupped the back of her head, his bloody fingers tangling in her hair, and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was rough, desperate, and tasted of salt and iron. It was a kiss that tried to erase the last 6 hours of hell. Lena kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands framing his face, not caring about the blood, not caring about the danger. She needed to feel that he was real. She needed to know that the monster had come for her. They broke apart, gasping for air. Their foreheads rested against each other. "You are hurt," Lena whispered, looking at the dark stain spreading on his white shirt. "It is nothing," Dante said. He looked her in the eyes, his gaze intense and unyielding. "Listen to me. I am not letting you go again, not until you are safe, not until you tell me to. Do you understand?" Lena nodded, tears spilling over her lashes. She was terrified of the gunfire outside, terrified of the blood on his shirt, but in the circle of his arms, she felt an anchor. "I understand." "We have to move," Dante said, pulling away reluctantly. "Can you run?" "Yes," Lena said, wiping her face. Dante took her hand, gripping it tight. "Stay behind me. Do not let go." They ran back into the corridor. The gunfire had intensified. Marco was holding the intersection, pinned down by heavy fire from the north end of the warehouse. "Boss, we are cut off!" Marco yelled over the roar of assault rifles. "The east exit is blocked." Dante scanned the layout. The main exits were swarming with Navarro men. They were being herded. "Where is Rico?" Dante shouted into his radio. "Rico, bring the heavy squad to the east door." There was no answer, only static. Then, Rico's voice cut through, clear and mocking. "Sorry, boss. I think you're on your own for this one. Just business." Dante stopped. The betrayal hit him harder than the bullet. Rico, a man he had known for 15 years, a man who had eaten at his table. Lena saw the look on Dante's face, a flicker of pure devastation before the mask slammed back down. "He set us up," Dante realized aloud. "The ambush, the formation, he handed us to them." Bullets sparked against the metal wall inches from Lena's head. She screamed, ducking. Dante shoved her toward a narrow opening between 2 rows of shipping containers. "In there!" They scrambled into the maze of metal boxes. It was a labyrinth of shadows and steel. The sounds of the battle were muffled here, but the echo of boots on the concrete floor told them they were being hunted. "We cannot get out the way we came," Dante said, pressing his back against a red container. Checking his ammunition, he had 1 magazine left. "What do we do?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. She pressed close to him, trying to stop the bleeding on his shoulder with the sleeve of her cardigan. Dante looked at her. He saw the fear, but he also saw the steel in her spine. She was not breaking. "We go to the docks," he said grimly. "The waterfront is the only side they cannot block completely. But that is open ground," Lena whispered. "I know," Dante said. He reloaded his weapon, the metallic click loud in the silence. "It is a trap, but it is the only move we have left." He looked at Rico's silence on the radio, then at the blood on Lena's hands. "When I find him," Dante vowed, his voice low and cold, "I am going to make him wish he had died in the war." He took Lena's hand again. "Ready?" Lena took a breath. She looked at the man who had ruined her family, the man who had saved her life, the man she loved against all reason. "Ready," she said. Dante led her deeper into the maze, moving toward the smell of the ocean and the final stand that awaited them at the water's edge. The salt air off the harbor tasted like rust and ice. The wind howled through the skeletal frames of the shipping cranes, rattling the chains that hung suspended in the dark. Dante moved with a limp, his left hand pressed tight against the makeshift bandage on his shoulder. The blood had soaked through his white shirt, turning it a stark, terrifying crimson. But his grip on his pistol was steady. He led Lena and the 3 remaining loyal enforcers, Marco included, into the maze of the container yard. "They have the high ground," Marco hissed, scanning the tops of the stacked metal boxes. "Boss, this is a kill box. We are walking into a grave." Dante did not answer. He knew it was a grave, but it was the only piece of ground left where they could force a standoff rather than a massacre. Lena stumbled on a loose cobblestone. Dante caught her instantly, his good arm wrapping around her waist to steady her. "I can walk," Lena gasped, her breath pluming in the cold air. "Stay low," Dante commanded. His voice was rough, strained by pain. "There is a maintenance shed near the water. Thick walls. I'm going to put you inside. You lock the door and you do not open it until you hear my voice." "No," Lena said. Dante stopped. He looked down at her, his eyes wild with the desperate need to protect her. "Do not argue with me. Lena, not now. I am not arguing. I am helping," Lena snapped. She pointed toward the row of idling trucks parked in a semicircle near the main loading dock. "Look at them. Dante." Dante glanced at the trucks. They looked like standard Navarro transport vehicles. "Look at the spacing," Lena urged, her accountant's brain finding the pattern in the chaos. "They are not parked for loading. The gaps between the cabs are exactly 5 feet wide. That is too narrow for forklifts. It is an infantry screen." She traced the line of the vehicles with a shaking hand. "They are funneling you toward the center lane. They have a crossfire set up behind the blue crate on the left and the red one on the right. If you go up the middle, you are dead." Dante stared at the layout. She was right. It was a classic pincer movement, disguised as a messy parking job. If he had followed his instinct to charge the center, they would have been cut to pieces. "Marco," Dante said, his voice changing, sharpening. "Did you hear her?" "Loud and clear," Marco said, looking at Lena with newfound respect. "Flank left," Dante ordered. "Go through the gap in the trucks. Take out the shooter behind the blue crate first. It will collapse their line." Marco nodded and signaled the other 2 men. They vanished into the shadows, moving away from the trap instead of into it. Dante looked at Lena. "You just saved us." "We are not safe yet," Lena whispered. They moved forward, creeping along the edge of the seawall. The water churned black and oily below them. Suddenly, floodlights blazed to life, blindingly bright. So much for the element of surprise. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Dante pushed Lena behind a heavy iron bollard and stepped out, shielding her with his body. Rico stepped into the pool of light. He was flanked by 6 Navarro soldiers, all heavily armed. Beside him stood Navarro himself, a short, vicious man in a camel hair coat who looked out of place among the grime of the docks. "Rico," Dante called out. His voice was calm, carrying over the wind. "I should have known. You always were too ambitious for your own good." Rico laughed. He held a rifle loosely in one hand. "And you, Dante, you were always too soft. I told you years ago that trying to go legitimate would kill this family. And look at you, bleeding out on a dock because you could not keep your eyes off the help." He gestured vaguely at where Lena was hiding. "You lost your edge. Boss," Rico sneered. "You traded your empire for a girl. It is pathetic." Dante did not flinch. He did not look at his wound. He stood tall, the wind whipping his bloody shirt. "I traded nothing," Dante said. "I just finally found something worth fighting for." Navarro stepped forward, impatient. "Enough talk. Kill him." Gunfire erupted. It was deafening. The sound bounced off the metal containers, amplifying into a roar. Dante dropped to one knee, firing with lethal precision. 2 of the Navarro soldiers went down in the first volley. From the left flank, Marco's team opened up, catching the ambushers off guard just as Lena had predicted. The crossfire Navarro had planned turned into chaos. Lena pressed herself against the cold iron of the bollard, covering her ears. The ground vibrated with every shot. She squeezed her eyes shut, terrified. But when she opened them, she saw Dante. He was moving constantly. He fired, moved, checked her position, and fired again. He was a whirlwind of violence. But every movement was calculated to keep the line of fire away from her. He was drawing their attention, making himself the target. Dante! Lena screamed as a bullet sparked against the concrete inches from his leg. Dante ignored it. He was focused on Rico. He saw his traitorous captain ducking behind a pallet of crates, but in the chaos, they had lost track of Navarro. Dante turned to reload, and in that split second, a shadow lunged from behind the bollard. Lena felt a rough arm clamp around her throat, cold metal pressed against her temple. She screamed, clawing at the arm, but the grip was iron. She was hauled to her feet, dragged out into the open circle of light. "Stop!" Navarro shrieked. "Stop or I blow her brains out!" The shooting stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the ragged breathing of men and the slap of waves against the dock. Dante froze. He was 10 feet away, his gun raised, aimed directly at Navarro's head. But Navarro was using Lena as a human shield. Her feet dangled slightly off the ground. Her eyes met Dante's. They were wide, terrified, pleading. "Drop it." Navarro screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "Drop the gun. Moretti, or she dies right now." Dante looked at Lena. He looked at the gun in his hand. He looked at Rico, who was standing up now, smirking in triumph. If Dante dropped the gun, they would kill him. He knew that. He would die. His empire would crumble, and everything he had built would be gone. But if he fired, he might hit Lena. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. Dante slowly lowered the gun. "Boss, no!" Marco shouted from the shadows. Dante ignored him. He crouched down and placed his weapon on the concrete. He kicked it away. It skittered across the dock, stopping at Rico's feet. "Let her go," Dante said. His hands were empty. His chest was open to their bullets. "You want the territory? Take it. You want the routes? They are yours. Just let her walk away." Rico laughed, a low, cruel sound. He picked up Dante's gun. "You really are a fool, Dante. You think we're going to let a witness walk away? We're going to kill you both. And then we are going to take the city." Lena felt Navarro's grip tighten. She felt the barrel of the gun dig into her skin. She looked at Dante. He was standing there, unarmed, bleeding, ready to die just to buy her a few more seconds of life. He had surrendered everything for her. Love over power. A fierce, hot anger ignited in Lena's chest. It burned through the fear. She was not a witness. She was not a victim. She was the woman who loved Dante Moretti, and she was not going to let him die. She remembered the self-defense moves Dante had shown her in the kitchen, half joking. If someone grabs you from behind, they expect you to pull away. Don't pull, drop your weight. Lena stopped struggling. She went limp for a fraction of a second, confusing Navarro. Then, with every ounce of strength she possessed, she drove the heel of her boot down onto the arch of Navarro's foot. Navarro howled in pain. His grip loosened just slightly. Lena threw her head back, smashing her skull into his nose. There was a sickening crunch. Navarro stumbled back, blinded by pain, the gun wavering. Dante moved. He did not run. He launched himself. He crossed the 10 feet between them like a striking cobra. He tackled Navarro, driving him into the ground. At the same moment, sirens wailed in the distance. Not police, but the heavy horn of a harbor patrol boat, and from the shadows of the warehouse. A dozen men in tactical gear burst out, weapons raised. It was the reinforcements, the loyal men alerted by Lena's coded text message about Sector 4. They had arrived. "Drop your weapons," the lead enforcer shouted. Rico spun around, realizing he was outflanked. He raised his gun to shoot Dante, but Marco fired first. A single shot took Rico in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to his knees. Dante stood up. He was panting, his shirt ruined, his face smeared with grime. He hauled Navarro up by his lapels and threw him toward Marco. Tie him up, Dante rasped. He turned to Lena. She was standing there, shaking, rubbing her throat. Dante reached her in 2 strides. He grabbed her face, his hands trembling violently. "You foolish, brave girl," he whispered. "You could have been killed. I told you," Lena said, her voice breaking into a sob. "I am not just an accountant." Dante pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. He held her as if he was trying to fuse their bones together. Behind them, Marco had Rico on his knees. "Boss," Marco called out, "give the order." Dante turned. He looked at Rico. Rico looked back, defiant, expecting the bullet. That was the way of their world. Traitors died. Dante looked at Lena. He saw the way she was watching him, waiting to see what kind of man he truly was. He looked back at Rico. "Call the police," Dante said. The silence on the dock was absolute. Even Marco looked stunned. "The police? We are done with the old way," Dante said, his voice hard and final. "Tie them up. Leave the evidence of the shipment. Let the law handle the garbage. But boss..." Marco started. "I said call them," Dante roared. He turned back to Lena. He took her hand, interlacing his blood-stained fingers with hers. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's go home." The private room at St. Jude's Hospital was quiet, smelling of antiseptic and lavender. The only sound was the steady beep of the heart monitor. Dante sat on the edge of the bed. His shoulder was heavily bandaged, his arm in a sling. He looked washed out, the adrenaline finally gone, leaving him looking mortal. Lena stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline. She wore fresh clothes Marco had brought her, but she still felt the phantom pressure of Navarro's gun against her temple. "You should rest," she said without turning around. "I cannot," Dante said. "Why not?" "Because I have not told you the truth yet." Lena turned. Lena. She walked over to the bed. Dante looked at his hands, clean now. "Scrubbed of the blood. My father was a cruel man," Dante began, his voice low. "He built this family on fear. When he died, I took over because I thought I could fix it. I thought I could turn the ship around, but you cannot fix a house that is built on a rotten foundation." He looked up at her. His eyes were dark and full of shame. "I did not know about your father, Lena, I swear it, but I should have. It happened on my watch. I carry that sin, and I understand if you can never forgive me." Lena looked at him. She saw the man who had walked into a kill zone for her. She saw the man who had spared his enemy because she was watching. "I hated you for a long time," Lena admitted quietly. "Even when I started to like you, I hated you. But my father, he believed in redemption. He used to say that a man is not defined by his worst day, but by what he does the day after." She stepped closer, moving between his knees as he sat on the edge of the bed. She placed her hands gently on his hips, mindful of his injuries. "I love you," Dante said. The words came out simple, unadorned. "I love you, and I will burn this whole company to the ground if that is what it takes to keep you." "No," Lena said firmly. "You do not get to burn it down. That is the easy way out." Dante looked confused. "Then what?" "You fix it," Lena said. "You make it right. You turn the Moretti Group legitimate, for real this time. No more shell companies, no more intimidation. You use that power to build things, not break them. That will take years," Dante said. "It will be dangerous." "I know," Lena said, "but I am not going anywhere. Unless what?" Dante asked, his breath hitching. "Unless you choose violence again," Lena said, her voice steel. "If you choose the gun over the law, I am gone." Dante looked at her. He saw his future in her eyes. It was going to be hard. It was going to be terrifying. But for the first time in his life, it looked bright. "I promise," he whispered. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against her stomach. He let out a long, shuddering breath, letting go of years of armor, years of being the untouchable boss. Lena brushed her fingers through his hair, tracing the line of his jaw. "Kiss me," she whispered. Dante looked up. He leaned in slowly. There was no desperation this time. No frantic collision of teeth and fear. He pressed his lips to hers with a reverence that made her knees weak. It was a slow, deep kiss, tasting of promise and survival. His good hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. Lena melted into him, wrapping her arms around his neck, careful of his shoulder. They kissed until the hospital room faded away, until the only thing that existed was the warmth of their bodies and the steady beat of two hearts that had survived the fire. 6 months later. The morning sun flooded the corner office of Moretti Logistics. It was a different office, open plan. Glass walls, full of light, the dark mahogany and heavy drapes were gone. Dante sat at his desk, reviewing a contract for a municipal building project. He wore a gray suit, no tie. He looked younger, lighter. Lena walked in, holding a tablet. "The audit is complete," she said, smiling. "We're in the black. Legally." Dante looked up. He smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes. "I never doubted you," he said. A young intern, barely out of college, hurried past Lena carrying a stack of blueprints. He tripped over his own feet and bumped into her, steadying himself by grabbing her arm. "Oh, I am so sorry, Miss Hart," the intern stammered. Dante's head snapped up. His eyes narrowed. The old instinct, the possessive predator, flared to life for a split second. His jaw tightened. Lena caught his look. She didn't shrink away. She laughed softly. "It is okay, Ben," she said to the intern, patting his hand. "Just watch where you are going." She looked at Dante. She raised an eyebrow, challenging him, teasing him. Dante let out a breath. The tension left his shoulders. He shook his head and chuckled. A low, warm sound. "Ben," Dante called out. The intern froze, terrified. "Yes, Mr. Moretti? Good work on the blueprints," Dante said. "Thank you, sir." The intern scurried away. Lena walked around the desk. She stood next to Dante's chair. He reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. He brought her knuckles to his lips and kissed them. He still held her tight. He still watched the door. He would always be dangerous in his own way. But as he looked up at her, his eyes were clear. The shadows were gone. "I love you," he said. "I know," Lena replied, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Now get back to work. Boss, we have a company to run." Thank you so much for listening to She Thought the Mafia Boss Never Noticed Her Until He Saw Another Man Touch Her. I hope you enjoyed Lena and Dante's journey from darkness into the light. I would love to hear what you thought of the story. Please leave a comment down below and let me know where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Did you like how Dante handled the final confrontation? Let me know. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to hit that subscribe button for the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss a new episode. We have so many more passionate, exciting stories coming your way. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next story.